Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of The Gateway, conversations exploring the intersection of technology, business, and research. This episode is brought to you proudly by the OM&IS Department at Northern Illinois University, now offering a completely online master's degree in data analytics. For more information, feel free to visit niu.edu/online. Joining me today, Russ Devereaux, is my co-host and friend, Dr. Biagio Police. Biagio, welcome.
Ciao, guys. How you guys doing?
So I'm super excited about this topic, and today we're going to be discussing social media culture, interconnectedness, the inherent risks of sharing, oversharing, privacy, cybersecurity, all of those different things. So to help us examine this potent and timely topic, we will be speaking with two incredible guests, Arvin Verma and Dr. Tawfiq Alashoor. It's my pleasure now to introduce Arvin, an NIU graduate, so go Huskies, that brings over a decade of experience in a multitude of cyber facets, including information assurance, risk management, and IT innovation. During his vibrant career, Arvin has worked across numerous industries and for several Fortune 500 companies. Currently, Arvin is a cyber risk manager at Abbott, while also serving the U.S. Navy Reserves as a direct commission officer, as a Cryptologic Warfare officer, which Arvin, I think, is probably one of the coolest titles ever. So I'm really excited just to know that. So thanks for joining us, Arvin. Biagio?
And our other guest is Dr. Tawfiq Alashoor, which is an assistant professor at Copenhagen Business School, Department of Digitalization. So first of all, thank you to Tawfiq to be here with us at 10 p.m. at nights talking about this stuff. His research focused on privacy, decision-making, and cybersecurity. He conducts behavioral experiments and uses economics and psychology theories to study human and privacy decisions. He specifically study why humans share personal information despite their privacy-preserving preferences. Dr. Alashoor research potential and quality resulted in different awards receiving by prestigious IS, so Information System Organization, and publication. It's very great to have these two guests, and just can't wait for this conversation.
Perfect. So let's just jump right in. I want to start kind of broad, and maybe as our conversation grows, we'll be able to get into some deeper elements of this stuff. But for both of you, and Tawfiq, if we want to start with you, just kind of where are you coming from when we think about privacy, security, all of that stuff? What is that definition for you? What does that mean to you?
We starting with me?
Yes, sir. Please.
All right. Great. Thanks. Well, first, thank you for inviting me to this podcast. When I think about cybersecurity, it's two things, right? Security and privacy. These two things are very much related to each other, but they're still distinct from each other. When I think about the definition, to me personally, and this is based on research and studies that we have in this domain, security is about protecting information against danger. So if we take that simple definition, security is about protecting personal or organizational information, any kind of information or information asset against danger. Privacy is about protecting that information against intrusion or unauthorized access that may or may not lead to danger. So privacy is kind of the core fundamental thing that could lead to a security incident if we think about privacy and cybersecurity from like in depth. I can elaborate more on that, but we'll keep the conversation going and we'll get there.
Perfect. I like that definition. Arvin, do you have anything to add on that one? Because I know you kind of come from a little bit of a different side.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. Standard disclaimer, everything that I am going to be speaking about is my own opinions, does not represent the Department of Defense, Department of Navy, Abbott, and the other various groups, standard legalese. Yeah, I definitely agree with the comments made. You know, I'm going to add a little more caveat to that, where within cyber, we operate under the aspect of the CIA triad, so confidentiality, availability, and integrity. And that's really the bare bone foundation where we kind of see the intersection between security and privacy enter. But it really comes down to security being this very broad aspect in terms of how are we operating in this digitally connected age. How are we, say passwords or information security policies, right? Privacy is just one small component that plays into a bigger picture, but both are equally important. And, and now that we're in this large digitally connected age, we have a lot of information, social security numbers, we're conducting millions upon millions of transactions with our credit card data. All this data is out there. And, if we're not, you can implement all these security controls in place, but if you don't have the appropriate limitations on that, aka privacy, all that technology is up to waste. This is why we say people are the weakest link when it comes to implementing security programs. You can do as much as you can, but there will always be that breaking point. So that's why it's very critical that we understand privacy in this as well, in addition to security.
So then I want to jump on that a little bit more, because both of you talked about danger and all of that stuff. I understand inherently, just because of my own personal experiences, when I walk across the street, I need to look both ways because there's the threat of a car coming. For me, it's always been like, I know that my privacy, my data, all of that stuff, there's danger out there, but to like actually quantify that and say, okay, this is exactly what's going to happen has always been a little bit different. Can you guys maybe elaborate on what those dangers really are out there? What potentially is being risked when we're participating in these environments?
Yeah, should I go first?
Yeah, please, I can add on to it as well.
Okay. That's a difficult question. Because this danger is potential, is probabilistic, meaning that it may or may not happen. The probability of it happening is considered very low, but when it happens, the consequences are very much high in terms of impact. It's crazy because now I'm trying to wrap up, one example, but it's happening all the time, and that is the problem, or the difficulty for me to answer that question. Because if we think about it, imagine that there is a data broker. There's many of them, thousands out there, data brokers who are just ready to gather valuable data sets. So if there is one data set, and then they gather another data set, they'll buy it or trade it, and then they will combine and make a whole profile about about people, let's just say that. And then that data broker can monetize that data set by selling it to someone or a company that is interested in using that data set, giving that they know that some of those objects in that data set, and by objects I mean people here, are actually customers or users of some services that they provide. So now they will get extra information about those users, and they'll be more able to, let's say, send them targeted ads, or modify their insurance rate, or the offers they give to them. So I'm just giving a very generic example because I don't want to use one specific company, within this context. But that's what happens. So if I know so much about you as a human, I know what's your willingness to pay, money, how much you're willing to pay, and how much you're willing to receive, because I know some attributes about you as a human, and that helps me predict your future behavior or decision, buying, purchasing decision. So in that case, if I know enough about you, I can actually adjust, for instance, the price of a good that I'm trying to sell to you, because I know you'd be more willing to buy that if I presented it in a certain format. So that's the risk. So some people are okay with that. When I teach cybersecurity, I try not to consider that as a risk all the time, because it's not really risk all the time. It's what people need to know is being aware of that fact that is happening, and then you decide for yourself if you're okay with it or not. You're as a human, you're being like juggled by multiple organizations, companies. So if you're okay with that, it's okay. Just be aware of that fact. It is happening.
So let me jump in this. So basically what you're saying is, data, your data is money, and, a company can gather your data and then disseminate among other people. So, when something that everybody else does is download the application, and because they can be useful for helping us throughout the day and doing different action. But by doing this download of this application, if we are not aware of what the terms policy is, we might not know that those people are sending those data to, third party potential companies they are aware of. So what you're saying is, be careful with this kind of stuff, because your data might be all over the world, and you need to be careful of what you're sharing with that, right?
I think the data is already out there, right? So the data is already out there, and I don't even use sometimes the word be careful, be aware. I think is the most neutral word to use in here. Be aware of this is happening. You're being traded. Your data is being traded all the time. Be aware of that. Whether or not you like it, it's happening. So you can adjust your future privacy behavior, and that's what you can do if you are very much concerned about your data.
But do you think? So I totally agree on that. But do you think, like, if Apple has those data, right, is the same thing of, a new app that has 100 downloads that you don't know who even is the producer, right? That's probably the point I was trying to make, right? So when you download an app, yeah, it will help you. The company might be able to get the data, but who is producing the app? It can be a difference, right? Because Apple is pretty good, I would say. Arvin might give more perspective, but I think some companies do much better job in dealing with our data than other companies, right?
So I think where we're going down now is the path of regulated versus unregulated data, right? A lot of the data that we're seeing being exploited is non-regulated data. So it's those data attributes that explain our behavior, our various activities. A lot of it, as we're seeing, is from Facebook or Twitter or those type of mechanisms. There really hasn't been put any type of legislation or requirement that prevents that. That's why we're seeing those behaviors being performed, and that's why we're seeing that data being sold, because data has value, and like it was said, can be used to monetize for the marketing of a product. If we're now going into regulated data, it's a little different story. There's actual consequences. There are, individuals can receive damages out of it. So that's where the bigger question comes in: is, do we go ahead and work with our politicians, our elected officials, and say we need to change the construct of what data is and what does it mean about a particular individual and how it's being utilized to sufficiently protect it? Here's the downside. Organizations don't want to do it because it costs time and effort on their side to get in alignment with that. Many years ago, I was in Springfield, Illinois, speaking to the Cybersecurity Analytics Committee about implementing a law for the state of Illinois that would protect the use of financial data as it was being utilized, and would ensure that in the event that any of this data suffered a breach or was released with unauthorized intention, the Illinois residents could pursue damages against that particular organization. Unfortunately, the bill did not pass, primarily due to the lobbyists, and second, in my opinion, the lack of understanding by our elected officials of how lethal these cyber attacks can be and how this data can be utilized. Where I say that, there's a quote I use quite extensively. It's by Robert Mueller. There are two types of companies: those that have been hacked and those that will be. It's just going to keep on getting worse and worse. We saw it with SolarWinds. I just saw something about IKEA suffering a breach. And then, the Spacecom commander, and it's funny because I'm actually on a Space Force base right now where they were talking about how satellites are now getting hacked. We're seeing this more and more and more. The issue is we're not taking action, and we're not taking the right action. And what is that breaking point going to be? And it's interesting, being in uniform, is we look at it from a lethality perspective. At what point is that lethality going to be defined, and when are we going to hit that point? For us in cyber, our perspective is, first goal is health and human safety. It's not about technical controls. That's a lot of people think that's a crazy idea, but rule number one, you got to make sure individuals are safe, and we're not impacting them. And this goes back to the crux of the equation is, have we defined that? And we haven't. And that's what's resulting in a lot of these behaviors, is we're allowing this type of activity to occur, and it's going to get to that point where it's being used in a way that's going to start targeting individuals, say with certain health conditions. So say if they're browsing a certain prescription medication and it's for preventing a heart attack. Now, how to utilize that and go into, say, a disinformation campaign, or begun flooding their, say their YouTube page with a competitor medication that may not be as effective, right? Now you're going into a potential implication of killing someone. And it's just that has not been realized. And I mean, this is going a little bit off a tangent, but I think that's where we see that connection between privacy, security, and real world application, and that's really missing from a lot of the components and work that we're trying to do in this space.
So when you're both talking about what I would say is real world threats within this stuff, is it reasonable to say that we're going to see cyber attacks, hacking, whatever we want to call that stuff, actually impact the physical world much more in the future? Is that like a real thing, or is that still just, hey, that's sci-fi, that's movies, that's ways away, and I just have to worry about my social security number not being posted on Facebook?
It's already happened. There were two specific cyber attacks against hospitals where they suffered ransomware. And as a result of that, because they couldn't operate, 2 individuals died. Now, for what I do at Abbott, my job is primarily securing a lot of our manufacturing, ICS, industrial control system, operational technology capabilities, which is quite different from typical corporate IT. We're producing products that individuals consume. We are making devices that people use to check their blood sugar. We are, we make the COVID tests. So it's very, very precise that we get what we're doing right. And if we see an impact to our operations and something gets tainted, it's not going to look good for us. Same thing when I was at PepsiCo. It's a little different cultural gap there, because at Pepsi, we're selling chips and soda. So there's not so much of a realization to impact as much as I hate to say it, but similar concept. There's also intellectual property. There's value tied to that work that's been built in. So how are we protecting that? How are we protecting our brand? But at the end of the day, how are we ensuring that we're able to deliver a quality product that serves its purpose to our customers without imparting any damage to them?
And Tawfiq, I want to pull you in on this one, because now, like I said, we're talking about real impacts in here, and your research, your background is studying decision making and technology, how that's adjusting it. do you know, is this even a reasonable question, when we may start to adjust our behavior, or will the allure of TikTok famous and social media, followers and all that stuff pull us that we're perfectly fine taking that risk because, well, it's the easiest way to become recognized?
I'll give you an example of an experiment we've run so many times. So we bring us a set of people, a number of people. We ask them a number of questions. What is your gender? What is your year of birth? What is your favorite book? What is your favorite TV show? Do you use a common password for your online accounts? Just the answer is just yes or no. We don't ask for password or anything, but that's a sensitive question. You can sense it. The questions involve financial stuff like how many bank accounts you have. It's not what is your bank accounts, just how many. It's an indicator that helps us tell whether that person has a lot of money or not, whether basically from a social engineer perspective, whether that person is of interest to us or not. So these simple indicators can help a social engineer narrow down the target, right? By if they answer those questions. So going back to the experiment, a number of people received these questions, and to answer, there's either yes or no or a box. So there's a box, they enter the information if they want to. And they could skip, but we don't tell them you can skip these questions. It's a study, right? So they're participating in a research study. And we understand if some people skip those questions, some of them are very sensitive. Well, the other group of people, we ask the same exact questions, except that we provide, we make them more aware by giving them one more choice that says, I prefer not to provide this piece of information. That's it. Same exact, the same questions. The only difference is that choice. And what happens, as we predicted and everyone would predict, that if you saw that choice, you're more likely to click on that choice and not provide that information. Although you were able to skip that question in the other condition. And what that tells us is humans, at least during this age, we always see significant difference, about 6 data points on average, 5 to 6 data points, just because individual let's say out of 20 questions, 6 questions would be answered more by those who did not receive this simple nudge, which is, I prefer not to answer this question. I ran this experiment so many times in the US, in the UK, with my students, even here in Denmark, and it always works. And what that means is humans would probably not provide that information if they were aware. And so imagine this is an experiment. So the people were randomly assigned to these 2 conditions, one of these 2 conditions. And therefore, if they were placed randomly in that condition in which they received that, I prefer not to provide this information, they're going to click on that for some question. But just because they were randomly assigned to that condition where they did not have this choice, they gave that piece of information. And that tells us something fundamental about human behavior when it comes to privacy decisions. And now here it comes to the social engineer perspective, as I started with. So imagine there's a social engineer out there running, using a camouflage or whatever. And this is the study. Can you please answer these questions? And it's a simple technique that they could use, and they target. Of course, they'll collect more in the back end of that survey. You can collect metadata, IP, location, extra. You don't even need to go to social media to identify their location. You can get that, latitude and everything in the back end of that survey tool. So there are things that could go are a little scary, but when you're aware, of these things, you're less likely to fall prey to, the bad guys.
It reminds me of the old like frog in the boiling water, like we all kind of come up with this and it's okay until all of a sudden, no, now all my data's out there, everything's there. Is that something like that? If we just
this is very relevant to what there's a Harvard professor called Shoshana Zuboff, I think that's how her name is pronounced, and she wrote about surveillance capitalism. So she was talking about the frog, exactly the same thing. We just woke up learning that Google, Facebook, etc., they were able to utilize this new oil, and we are now living in a surveillance capitalism or surveillance capitalistic society where there is a behavioral data surplus. These companies have that surplus of knowing our behaviors, and therefore they can predict our future behaviors, and therefore they can intervene to achieve some objectives that they have, whether these objectives are good or bad for us or for them, but they have this capability of predicting our future behavior. And we were the frogs, as you said. So that experiment is actually a very good metaphor.
Well, and then Arvin, I kind of want to switch along the lines with this one, because I think at least a common thread within privacy I hear in conversations a lot is that idea that, well, I don't have anything to hide. Like, why do I care about that if I have nothing to hide? Is that like, stereotypically that argument goes, well, I'm not doing anything illegal, I'm not a criminal, I'm fine, like I don't really care about that. Is that a justifiable position to have? Is that where we should be, or is that kind of misguided?
I think it's misguided, but then again, it's always in the eye of the beholder, right? They're going to say that up until they're actually put in a situation where they do have something to hide, or they do have something that they need to protect, right? When I was in Springfield, I asked the committee, I said, who here has suffered an identity theft situation? One rep raised her hand and she said it was pretty mild. And I said, describe mild. They said, oh, they just got one of my email addresses and were sending fake emails. She didn't think that was impactful, but it is impactful. And then I told them my story where they took my social, they got into my bank account, they took everything. And then I also told them I found the guy in 5 minutes, but that's a different story. But that's where it comes to the realization part, because yeah, you might not have anything to hide, but there's going to be an impact. So say, for example, you have, so like Kim Kardashian, right? Because I know everyone loves talking about her. She has a personal brand associated with her. So she's able to do this, and I'm not hiding anything. Well, how easy would it be to utilize deepfake and do something that is malicious in nature to destroy that brand? That's where the question is, how is that data being utilized to doing something malicious to hurt or impact the individual in a negative way to drive a certain reaction or response? That's why deepfake, disinformation campaigns, that's why it's a very, very big topic right now within the cyber community. And it's very, very tough. I was actually just having this conversation with a few folks here as well. How do you identify individuals and how do you stop it? And my opinion is you can't, because it goes into realms of the Constitution and free speech. Now, it's not as extreme as yelling fire in a crowded theater, right? But it still falls into those provisions up until a point where it does become shouting fire in a crowded theater. So this will be a battle that we face for many, many years. But and if someone says I don't have anything to hide, they have something to hide. They're just saying it just to make themselves feel better.
Yeah, I could say that all day long, but I don't want people looking at what I buy on Amazon. Like, no, that's
But
There is,
to be honest, even if you don't have anything to hide, if you provide information out there, people might know stuff about your behaviors. You can have they can know that you are on vacation, and then there might be somebody coming at your house while you are away. If you keep sharing with a public Instagram profile, right? You might just incur on simple stuff like this one, which are not huge consequences, like Arvin is saying, but in the same times you are just compromising something about yourself.
I have a
example, for
point
me,
on this. Go ahead, Arvin.
sorry to cut you off. Like for me, with some of the work that I do, yes, I have a clearance, as part of my job. I've had to declare everything to the government in order to get that. So that's a little different, but that's just because of the nature of work and the type of activities that I'm performing. And they still will occasionally check in that, but with that, there are still provisions. Like I still have a LinkedIn, I still have a Facebook, I still have my Instagram, but it's with caution and awareness of what you're posting. Like I was going to post something on Twitter earlier today over a situation that occurred to me this past week. And it was going to go to an elected official. But then I thought, okay, well, what are the repercussions of this after I do this, right? And that's where I'm very interested in looking into the emotional side of where cyber is going and why individuals are doing that. And that has really been a big eye opener in terms of how data is being pushed out, how data is being received, how it's being effectively utilized to misconstrue a certain opinion, certain message. It's like, the game telephone. After 7-8 people, the message gets so misconstrued, you don't even understand what its true intent is. So, it's interesting to look at it from the psychological point, but that's really where it starts. It's people. Everything is based on people and emotion.
Arvin, you mentioned freedom of speech, right? So this is very relevant to I have nothing to hide. I want to go back to that because there's a famous quote by Edward Snowden. It goes this way: arguing that you don't care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say. So it's even beyond just freedom of speech. So if you have nothing to hide, that's okay. You don't have to hide it. But the problem is you're compromising. So there's something that Biagio were referring to is autonomy, control over your future behaviors. And we as humans, we're debating whether we have free will or not. It's one of the deepest philosophical scientific questions, whether we actually have control over decisions that we make on a daily basis. The problem from a privacy perspective is if we actually have some freedom or free will, that is going to be minimized to a large extent if we keep sharing more and more, because the cues around us are going to contribute more and much more to the decisions that we make. So imagine you walk into a Walmart or any store, and imagine that store knows your favorite color. Imagine now this is a digital world, metaverse, and you're just shopping around. And that store, digital store, knows enough about you that you love these colors. So, and they want to sell you stuff. So they're going to use that color more often to influence your buying behavior. So this is how it can minimize humans' control along, in the future. The more we think about it, the less free will humans will have, and that's the big problem of AI, or us shifting to, cyborg. I have no problems with that, but this is the explanation to this situation.
So both of you are addressing kind of, I think this conversation is touching around, and I think it's only a matter of time until it goes to the elements of a government level when it comes to privacy as well. Like, I know there's bad actors out there. There are those criminal elements and black hat hackers and hackers and all that stuff. But so when we're talking about new technologies and new ways to maybe even attack, go beyond the offensive, or to prevent an attack against us, I think it's really common, at least from our Western civilization, or maybe even more of an American kind of a power-based belief that, that's a good thing. And if we're using it against other people, that's perfectly fine. If these are bad actors, we should go to it. But then I start to get kind of conflicted when you see a lot of that stuff then start to trickle into our own lives and our own things, and those different elements there, that now something that might have been used in a war zone is also being used at a given protest or something like that. How do we figure out free will, freedom, rights within a society, while also still knowing that we may be utilizing those very same techniques against other people that then start to impact us?
Am I going?
Yeah, that's a tough question. It's kind of going into it goes into an area where a lawyer would be best able to answer it from a layman's term perspective, because once again, we have the Constitution. We look at China and Russia, they're based on communism, so much different perspective. I'll try to answer as high level as possible, and without going into too much detail in the offensive side of it as well, because then if I tell you I have to kill you, there's some truth to that actually. But
thanks, Arvin. That's gonna make me
yeah. I'll put it like this: we have the Constitution, which allows us freedoms and liberties to do as we please to a certain extent. But it also comes down to how are we defending our interests and how are we defending our country to ensure there's no impact to this idea we call democracy. That's at a high level is the best way we can explain it. If we have a Chinese or Russian adversary not like what we're doing, my opinion is they are entitled to do that because that's what we believe. But when it starts going down to a path where they need to resort to a kinetic form of warfare, then it changes. Then the perspective changes, because now you're taking and what I consider cyber is a non-kinetic form of warfare. You can do damage, but it's not currently at the moment not direct. Once it becomes a direct impact, then the game changes dramatically. And we've realized that to a certain extent, but we're also not at that level where it's having that level of impact, where we're seeing power and utilities getting impacted. We're seeing our water systems getting impacted. We're seeing mass pandemonium and havoc. We're not seeing, if a lot of you are gamers and Call of Duty, they have the little mini video where it shows that the Russians have spoofed some of the radar systems, and they have the Russians coming in from the East Coast and West Coast. We're not at that level yet, but we are aware of it. And I think right now it's more on our politicians doing what they get paid to do, which is managing that level before it gets to that extremism where we see that kinetic warfare. The other side of it is we're seeing this economic impact resulting out of it. So with China, right, we are in competition. There's this topic called great power competition. So this is really where we've shifted a lot of the warfighting efforts from the CENTCOM, Afghanistan, Iraq area, and we're now looking at the buildup in the China and Russia area. And you can Google this. The Navy has put out a lot of paperwork on this. Really interesting read if you want to look into it. But we're seeing this large economic growth from these countries, and that's fine. But when it's becoming to impact under what we call the rules of, a good example of this is in the Navy, there's a UN law called Law of the Sea, right? And I'm sure a lot of you have seen where now the Chinese government is saying that any ship that passes through the Taiwanese Strait has to declare itself what it's doing and what not. Well, technically that is in violation of the Law of the Sea. So we're seeing that limitation because of this aspect of control. And what, my opinion is we're seeing China do a lot of these activities so they can maintain control, grow their economy, and get up to a level where they're able to go into that kinetic form of warfare, in my opinion. But really, that's what it comes down to. It's more about driving that nation state activity that helps promote what their efforts are, that's leading to a lot of these resulting actions and a lot of these behaviors that we're seeing. Because before it was just, one or two people or these hacking groups anonymous, they were doing things, but they were doing it to send a message, right? They were trying to promote a social agenda. Here, it's now more about driving a country's economic growth and ability to, once again, in my opinion, drive intimidation to other countries to say, hey, we're a force to be reckoned with. Do you really want to go down this path? So mixing a little bit of the, civilian private sector economic side with the military side, but it's a very, very tough question. I know a lot of individuals I'm talking to, both, at various three-letter agencies, private sector, public sector. We don't know, and we won't know until after it happens, unfortunately. The talks I'm having with FBI and DHS CISA, it's, we get these situations that occur, but we don't know how to respond to them because sometimes it's the first time we've seen it. And then the FBI's jurisdiction only goes so far. And then is the UN going to pursue the criminal complaint? No, because they don't have the laws defined either. It looks like my lights went out. 1 second.
This is what happens when you start talking about privacy. The lights they cut out.
But yeah, we're getting hacked. Like someone's listening.
Right. So I want to jump to you then on this one, because I think this kind of goes to where you're at a little bit more. But within all of these conversations, then what is the future of privacy? What does that look like? Should we just kind of throw our hands up and accept it and say this is what it is and start living with our locations on constantly and our video cameras on because there's no point? Or what does that look like in your opinion?
Thanks for the tough question. So this relates to your previous question too. So there's two big broad domains that could help how we move forward from an ethical perspective. You brought ethics, so I think there's trade-off, the greater common good, or is there benefit versus cost, and therefore I would reveal my data if the benefit outweighs the cost in the short term or in the long term, regardless. But the concept is a trade-off. The other thing is the ontology, right? So there's principles. So if we go to ethics constitution, there's a policy that you follow and that's it. Or the trade-off. So there's two things, and I don't think we have an answer to that question, at least me. But what I'm thinking is it's changing. So the concept of privacy is going through a revolutionary change, and I'll just give you an indicator, and that will hopefully help our audience a little bit to have a bigger perspective on privacy, which is ownership. When we think about privacy, we think about ourselves. It's not that anymore. And now privacy is not only yours. If you're carrying a phone, even not using it, the phone is recording your movements, and it's recording when you sleep. It has those indicators and with high accuracy, and therefore you are not fully private all the time, even if you're staying within your house. As long as you have some technologies that are digitalizing some stuff from that house, we can make some inferences about your behaviors. And therefore, because you allowed that technology to be in your life, the personal data that you generate every day through your body motion, or through your writing, or just speaking, this is personal data that is being generated by humans. When it's shared, when it's out, it's not, it's not personal anymore. It is personal, and it's also shared. It's co-owned by that technology provider that is able to quantify or collect or record, capture that data. So ownership, though, when you reveal something on social media, it doesn't mean that's your data. Facebook provided some service to you to host that piece of information that you posted in there, so they have the power, or at least the negotiation power, to say, I co-own this data. And most of us signed that policy already a long time ago, so they were proactive in that sense. We were not, as users. And I'm not saying that we should go and read. It's unbelievable. I don't think people should go and read these policies. It's definitely not a recommendation. I think it's a flawed practice. Consent form is a flawed practice. In the current format, it's not working, and that's a big practical problem that needs to be solved in this domain. I think I branched around, but ownership is the point that I wanted to bring up here. That whatever we share is co-owned by so many parties now. Not only Facebook, there's like a bunch of data brokers, especially. So where privacy is going I think the answer is going through some changes. We will adapt to it. And if we think about security from the past thousands of years ago, if we think about physical security, it took humans so many years to become civilized and then figure out a structure, a system to secure individuals. When you go out walking, you don't look all the time. You're secured to some extent, but we're not 100% secured. In the digital world, we want to do that within 20, 30 years. It's almost impossible. We need more time to figure out this notorious problem. It's just new. So we're going through these changes, and hopefully for the best. Sorry, Biagio.
No. I was jumping to this because I'm a big fan of technology. I love technology. I love that we are in a connected world. But this ownership things you're talking about is, now that I think about it, I have Apple Watch, I have smart devices in my house, so I talk with my TV, talk with my thermostat. My Amazon Echo might be on and might listen to what I'm saying. I mean, it comes to the realization where, I'm a private person. I don't share much on social media, but when you were thinking about it, what you were saying is like, I'm not that private as I think, because, I share a lot through these smart devices, this Internet of Things that, network that we're living in. And so my question would be, what can we do to go back to a little bit more privacy or a little bit more security in that sense? Because do we need to stop using this technology? Do we need to stop using this application? I mean, how do we move our heads around this? I love all the benefits of it. So that's why I'm probably willing to do it, but
these were designed with convenience, right? It was designed with the intent of making lives easier, but we didn't think about security because it was an afterthought. It's like now what we're seeing with 5G. 4G and LTE was designed for a specific purpose, and then it started getting exploited. Now we're seeing 5G, which has the embedded encryption embedded security capabilities. So we need to reevaluate these smart devices and how we protect that information to have it embedded, have that cultural of security so that we're able to do it. I mean, I'm here, almost couple thousand miles away from Chicago, and I'm able to see if my garage is open or closed. That's really convenient for me, but if someone goes in and breaks into my my account, because it's all username password based, they could go in and get in there and access it. Now, the vendor I have, they've added some controls in there that make it difficult, but if you put enough time and effort, you can do it. But now we go back to the whole incentivizing part, right? If we're making ourselves a smaller target online, the adversaries are going to focus their attention on those who are making themselves big targets. That's why you're seeing a lot of these fake accounts being made on Instagram, fake accounts on Twitter, things like that. It's because they're trying to target and deviate the attention from the authentic individual, authentic activity into something that's not authentic. So it comes on, how do you reduce your threat exposure? And I think what you're doing by kind of limiting your external exposure is helping, but it's also a lot of that stuff is still somewhat contained. You could go in and ask, like, how is my data being utilized under GDPR and some of those considerations. But that, once again, now we're kind of stepping into technological side versus the legalities. Europeans, they did GDPR, which I get it, but it was such a mess for us here stateside. But if we have something like that here, for the country, I think that would be one step in the right direction. But there's some individuals in Washington who believe that that's going to reduce the ability to do free trade and reduce capitalism, but we're not going to go down that path.
There is going to your question, Biagio. So you're saying, what should we do? I think it's important that humans define what privacy means to them personally before they know what to do, right? So maybe it's okay for some people that they share all of this and they get the convenient service. For others, maybe it's not. So humans need to understand their personalized or personal privacy calculus is in this domain we would call a calculus. You're weighing the cost against the benefit when you make these decisions. And so the issue is we don't know what privacy is to us, and if we don't know what it is, then it's hard to actually know what we're gonna do about it. We don't have a concrete definition of what privacy is, and that goes back to when Arvin was talking about the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability. That's cybersecurity 101 principle. And the first one, C, confidentiality. That's the biggest overlap between privacy and security. So we want to keep the data intact from any unauthorized access, and that's how you secure information in the first place. But going back to the definition of security versus privacy, we were talking about danger, right? So we want to minimize the danger. That's the ultimate goal. You want to minimize danger, risk. And so securing privacy or protecting personal data or privacy, if it is helping you minimize potential risk, then probably you should protect that personal data. If it has nothing to do, it's actually it's probably, for instance, if we put this in a context, if I share something on social media, oh yes, I'm increasing the risk of someone collecting a lot of information about me. But if that piece of information I'm sharing is going to give me a lot of benefit, for instance, my friends are going to react to it, my family, they need to know this. So there's a lot of social benefit in here and psychological benefit that I get reactions, I get interaction socially. So now if the benefit is more than the cost, right? If that is the case, then maybe it's okay. So we need to understand this calculus and how it works.
The problem I have with that topic, I think, is that's where, you know, this social media popularity and stuff like that. So a lot of people are not aware that, like, they posting something that yields to a lot of likes, a lot of popularity, but then, you know, in the long run, we will be the consequences. Internet will not forget what you just shared. It can be like some stupid that you did, and, you know, in 20 years, the company that is interviewing you, yeah, you are that guy, right? So I see the benefits, but you know, the cost might not be in the short run. So the benefits may be higher, but in the long run, it can be a completely different type of story. And, you know, TikTok, Instagram, all this, you know, creators economy kind of platform, that's the scary part, right? Is short run versus long run benefits. And
absolutely. That's acknowledged that privacy decisions have that short, like, immediate gratification, but then the cost is in the future. This is not only privacy issue, it's everything, right? Health. If you eat some, like, delicious meal but it's not healthy, you eat it because it's the gratification is immediate, but the cost comes in the future. So it's not only a privacy issue, we've faced this a lot in other contexts, and I think we're moving in the right direction of finding a balance in this specific domain.
Russ, I think you're.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry. I know we're getting close on time, so I kind of want to kind of group this whole conversation together, and it actually comes from a question from our audience. What are some tips, common sense things that the everyday person can do to, or should be doing, to increase that privacy? I know, you know, getting a lawyer and trying to get your GDPR and all that stuff, that's a great thing, but I don't think many people are. So, you know, both of you come from very strong backgrounds in this stuff. What are those things that maybe we all can take away and do right before a busy shopping season, at least here for most people in America?
Yeah, so one thing that I've done on every single device that I own is I've installed ad block, and there's another add-on for a lot of, you know, browsers like Chrome or Firefox that actually block external data feeds going out, and it gives you the opportunity to actually find and see what they are and where that data is going. So that's been one way I've been able to really lock down a lot of this information. Second thing is, you know, once you've done this long enough, you can kind of tell if a site's truly suspicious or not, but make sure when you're looking at a site that it says HTTPS and you have SSL encryption while you're doing those activities. VPN is nice, but, you know, I had this issue with my dad where he got some VPN provider that was on the TV for his company, and when he told me, I said, "You realize they have a concentrator in China, right? So all your stuff is now going to China and it's going to be stolen." So VPN has its place, but you have to utilize the right vendor, which has the right services within US soil, because that's where it'll be protected. You know, another thing you can do is, instead of typing your passwords, you know, they say use multiple passwords. I'm guilty of using the same password multiple times, but I have a password manager, specifically LastPass. I don't endorse brands, but I utilize LastPass, and that's been able to securely store a lot of my passwords in a vault. And, you know, combined with a lot of these activities, I've been able to secure a lot of the activity that I do with my activity, my online activity. Then there's, you know, the craziness that steps in where you're actually firewalling your home network, you're hiding your Wi-Fi. You know, I take it a little bit to the extreme, but you know, one of my industry colleagues and good friends and mentor, Dave Oxsmith, you know, he spent years at Microsoft doing cyber, and, you know, he had a very interesting perspective on passwords. He said, it's okay to write your passwords down, but don't just leave it lying around on the table. Like, actually put it like in a locked cabinet so you're not making it blatantly obvious. So I hate to say use common sense, because not everybody has common sense, but be smart about your decisions and what you're doing. Be aware, but don't go with the state of paranoia. I mean, I live in that state of paranoia, but it's because of what I do and who I work with. So I have to take those actions. But for the regular person, just following some of those basic practices, being vigilant, being aware. If you have to post something, post the bare minimum, but be smart about it. You'll be fine. A lot of these companies are building a lot of these secure capabilities in place, so they are addressing it. But you can help yourself out by just being a little bit more vigilant and aware when you're doing a lot of these activities.
I kind of put my answers in there. So there's different things you can do. To start with password, you can come up with a strategy that helps you create passwords. Phrase, for instance, a passphrase, and you customize that passphrase depending on the service that you are signing up for. So the password has that generic component in it, but then there is 2 or 3 or 4 specific components that are related to each one of those services. So you can easily remember these passwords, but it's not revealed to anyone. So the secret here is the model, not the specific password. So if someone got that model from your brain, they can decrypt everything and get the password for so many services that you have. So the strength of that technique is the model is yours, so you don't reveal it and don't write it anywhere, but just follow it, and then your passwords will be strong all the time. Use incognito. That's lightweight, the lightest thing you can do if you want to be secure. Track me not. This is an extension. The idea is your browser is going to visit so many websites, so it will confuse the browser when it's collecting your behavior in terms of browsing. So it will go to random websites, so it puts some noise in your browsing behavior, and therefore the receiver will not know what you are actually visiting. And 10-minute mail or email, 10-minute mail. Yeah, so that's a service, very, very convenient. If you're signing up for a website that you don't want to give them your email, go to this website, so quick. It will give you right away a random email, and you will have a box, and that box will last for 10 minutes, and it will, not a box, inbox, and you can extend those 10 minutes for 10 more minutes or even more. So, when you receive that verification code, it's an app that you're not sure if you're going to use it or not. You can rely on that, get the verification code and then go sign up and then use it. And then that email is a throwaway email because you're just trying it now. So it's very convenient. Track me now. So you try these different things from different angles, and that helps you, helps your data to be secured. I use other services too. There's, I forgot the name, but there is service providers that could actually check for you whether your data is secured, outside in the online world. So they do their measurements. So you pay, say, $100 a year, and they'll give you a report to tell you what is your status when it comes to privacy and security. So yeah, those are some tips I hope that will help.
I was throwing in the chat about two-factor authentication just because, like, I always thought it was a good one, because even if they ask me something, then they need to have also my phone, or I don't know. I thought it would be more difficult, and I'm nobody. I'm not famous. I don't have millions of dollars. Why do they invest that much time to try to hack me, right? So if they make stuff more complicated by having multiple ways to access into account, I thought that was a good one. But it seems Arvin is more towards like just for important stuff, super important stuff.
Well, I use mine because this individual got into my bank account, changed the email, and so I have to add that extra layer. But what he didn't realize was he used a Yahoo email address, and I was able to backtrack that to send the request to the phone number. I got his phone number, ran a reverse trace, and found the guy. And at that point, I had to give it over to the police and the FBI because, remember, rules of engagement. You can't do certain things once you're in. But
So moral of this whole conversation, if you're gonna hack and do something illegal, don't do it to a cryptological officer in the Navy, maybe. Like, that's just your first
well,
thing.
the FBI will find out, but if you hit the wrong person, it's
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for this conversation, Arvin and Tawfiq. This has been very insightful, and I know we can continue to talk about this for decades in the future. And I hope we do, because I think conversations like this are important, and I hope our audience enjoyed it and might be a little bit more enlightened or just aware of what's going on from this one. Be sure to listen to this podcast as well. We previously did a wonderful episode on AI, which we kind of touched on here. So that's up there. You can just go to the gateway and look at that stuff too. And we'll be having more future events in the new year, January, February, March. So thank you all again for being here. Arvin, Tawfiq, thank you so much. Biagio, my friend, it's always nice to hang out with you too. So everyone, have a really good rest of the day. Be safe and see you next year. Take care.